freedom time. The people of Grenada rose with dignity, rose up from oppression, rose up from iniquity and shame, from the darkness of desecration, shaking up paralysis of corruption, tyranny, violence and subjugation, to shine out before the Caribbean and strike terror into repressive regime and scrupulous politicians, and now trembling in their pants. Stand up, Grenada, stand up against Grenadian. Don't let nobody come in and dictate your course of action. All of them who oppose your revolution are political bandits just like here in their own island. Fight for your rights, protect what you have. You fought a good fight. Protect what you have. Don't give in a single inch. Don't retreat, not even a pinch. Don't compromise your revolution. For those scandalous teaching oppressive political scams in the Caribbean. No way, never rise. No way. Some talk of legality, constitutionality, but only to expose the hypocrisy. But if you examine the state of affairs in their land, you will find human rights violations, total disregard for the Constitution, complex political persecution, and a wave of sanctioned violence with the blessing of legislative criminals enforced by sadistic gangs. Just like the mongoose one, stand up, Grenada, stand up again, Grenadian. Don't let nobody come in and dictate your course of action. All of them who oppose your revolution are political bandits just like here in their own island. Fight for your rights, protect what you have. You fought a good fight now. Protect what you have. Don't give in a single inch. Don't retreat, not even a pinch. Don't compromise your revolution. For those scandalous teaching oppressive political scams in the Caribbean. No way, never rise. No way. God bless you, Grenada. May your freedom be blessed with longevity and prosperous your economy. May He grant your leaders wisdom, endurance, and courage to go on. For your road will be long and rugged. Many other problems to be confronted. God against corruption being repeated. May that rude awakening that early dawn be an example to tyrant in other land. No power, no weaponry can extinguish a people's will to be free. Stand up, Grenada. Stand up again, Grenadian. Don't let nobody come in and dictate your course of action. All of them who oppose your revolution are political bandits just like here in their own island. Fight for your rights, protect what you have. You fought a good fight. Protect what you have. Don't give in a single inch. Don't retreat, not even a pinch. Don't compromise your revolution. For those scandalous teaching oppressive political scams in the Caribbean. No way, never rise. No way.
Tendai Muari, be thankful unto the Mother, Father, creative life force of the universe. Kudzai Muzima Mokoro, give praises unto our great ancestors. Abibi Tumi, Abibi Fahodi, African power and African liberation for all African people. One God, one aim, one destiny. Greetings and welcomes, brothers and sisters, to this live session that we are conducting this afternoon, the 19th of October. Yeah, and obviously, for those who have been in tune with the thing, you know, over the last couple of weeks, you will know that this particular session was not advertised. Yeah, but I felt it was important. Yeah, to do something on this day, because this is in fact the day, the 19th of October, 1983, upon which Baba Maurice Bishop and many others of the Grenada Revolution were in fact killed, executed, assassinated. Yeah. And we have learned a lot over the past couple of weeks looking at the revolution. And if you've been studying the thing and paying attention, you will know that even though this 40th anniversary of this passing, and which signaled the end of the Grenada Revolution effectively, was a very sad and traumatic event, we have chosen in the midst of our discussion to really celebrate the life of Maurice Bishop and all those who contributed to the revolution. We decided to focus on the achievements and the successes of the revolution. We decided to highlight the work that was done to make the revolution function on behalf of the people of Grenada. And we also focused on the impact and the inspiration that this revolution provided for Africans throughout the Caribbean, and Africans throughout the world. Yeah. And so I do want to thank all of our guests who joined us for our previous conversation, but a couple days ago on Ojima Day, Tuesday. And yeah, it was a powerful session. You know what I mean? It was a powerful session. So what we're going to do today, yeah, what we are going to do today is mostly I'm going to be playing a speech, yeah, from Maurice Bishop. And I'll get into some of the backdrop of that speech very, very shortly. We're going to be joined by a special guest at some point as well, so do stay tuned for that. But I am going to play a speech because, as you see, the title of this today's session is "The Voice of a Revolution." Voice of a Revolution, Maurice Bishop speaks. Yeah, and so I thought it would be appropriate to resurrect the voice of Maurice Bishop and let it get a long play. All right. And the speech that I'm going to play is a very, very important one. It's arguably his most famous speech. And so you will learn a lot about the revolution and from his perspective. And I we'll get onto that shortly. 1 second, sorry. What am I trying to do? Okay. All right. I'm just working out some details in the background here. Okay. All right, family. We're gonna get into that shortly, yeah. But before we do so, I wanted to have a brief conversation with my father, who has just joined us, and we're gonna discuss one or two things, yeah, to do with Baba Maurice Bishop and the Grenada Revolution and its significance. And so let me bring forward Brother Leader Bandaka. Tendai Mwari, Brother Leader.
Tendai Mwari, Brother Shakara. Rumbid Zokuna Mwari, ye Africa, to the God of Africa be the glory. Giving thanks and praises. Great to be in service. Katika Uduma.
Indeed. Tendai Mwari. It's good for you to be here, Brother Leader, on this day. Yeah. A very sad day in many respects. Yeah. But in saying that, we are celebrating the lives of some very powerful people, and in particular, the life of the Prime Minister of Revolutionary Grenada, Baba Maurice Bishop. Yeah. What I'm going to do, Brother Leader, I'm going to do two things today. First of all, allow the listeners to get an idea of the influence of Maurice Bishop on yourself personally. And then the second thing I'm going to do is just give an insight, because we are Garveyites, and just give an insight on the level of inspiration that the Grenada Revolution received from the Garvey movement and Papa Garvey himself, from the words of Maurice Bishop himself. Yeah. And so, yeah, first and foremost, just provide us some idea of how you got to know about Maurice Bishop and the Grenada Revolution. Why do you think it's important for us as African people?
Oh, Tendai Mwari. Well, first of all, giving thanks and praises, Brother Shakara, for your work, for your commitment to the upliftment, the empowerment, and the total liberation of our people, and the fantastic work that you are doing on various platforms to continue to enlighten and inform our people, and to continue to provide leadership and inspiration in the battle for the reclamation and restoration of the minds and souls of our people. Maurice Bishop, interestingly, the implosion of the Maurice Bishop, not the Maurice Bishop, the implosion of the Grenada Revolution occurred in the same year that I mark my coming fully into the liberation fight, coming fully into liberation, onto Liberation Road. That was the year when I first attended the Pan-African Congress Movement Umoja Day Sunday meetings that used to occur at 25 West Green Road, where the headquarters of the Pan-African Congress Movement was, and where they also ran a shop counting my years on Liberation Road in a serious way. At the time, coinciding with the time I started attending the meetings of the Pan-African Congress Movement, and that was in the year so-called 19. Importance and the value of, well, I became properly familiar with the name Maurice Bishop, and of course naturally took an interest in what the significance of the Grenada Revolution was, and the implications for African people, for the implosion of the Grenada Revolution. And that registered at a very early stage as a serious blow to the African World Revolution, because what was clear was that the Grenada Revolution had inspired the entire global Pan-African movement in a very, very powerful way. Such a small country, 134 square miles, a population of tinkering on 100,000 African people, rose up, threw off the yoke of neo-colonial oppression, commandeered the machinery of state, and began to run a state of our own in our hands, and demonstrate to the African world what can be done. Was a powerful symbol, notwithstanding its size. And also we saw the fear and the agitation of the imperialist, European imperialist world. We saw how it destabilized global white supremacy. And so one realized, even at such a young stage on Liberation Road, that this was a serious blow to the African World Revolution.
Yeah, brother leader, you know, I mean, obviously, you raised me to know about Maurice Bishop. I was saying to our panel on a Jimmy Day on Tuesday that my first vivid recollection of Maurice Bishop was because the documentary Time and Judgment by our now ancestor Menelik Shabazz was on heavy rotation in our house. Yeah. And that particular clip always stayed with me. And growing up, learning more about the revolution and what they achieved. Yeah. I've always been passionate about the need for us to understand this revolution. And I think it was really this particular example. I think this and Nkrumah as so-called post-colonial, people that were operating in the neo-colonial era that achieved much, but oftentimes the story of their life is told by their defeat. Yeah. Gave me the conviction that we really need to tell the story of what they achieved. Like we need to learn some lessons from what they actually did and what they focused on. And I know that we've been doing that over Got Kush TV. We've been doing that also on Galaxy Radio. Yeah. Why is it important for us to focus on the achievements of the revolution and not just the implosion?
Well, it's extremely important that we focus on both, because one of them, the revolution itself, is a clear indication of our power potential as a people. The work that was done, the fact that the New Jewel movement was able to commandeer the machinery of state in the first place, when the Geary regime was so oppressive and had the backing of big, bad, mighty America, had the CIA behind it, and yet the young men and women of the New Jewel movement were able to operate underground surreptitiously and spring a surprise on the Geary regime that had in place a plan to execute and wipe out the New Jewel movement leadership. There was a plan that was left with his mongoose posse, call it what you will, that awful death squad that Geary created to maximize the oppression against our people and to ensure that revolution is impossible in Grenada. And yet, Geary, having left the country with clear instructions of how and when the New Jewel movement leadership was to be wiped out before he returned to the country. It looked as though it had nothing to do with him. And of course, the leadership was aware, they were wise to the plans, and they decided and determined that the revolution had to take place immediately and before Geary's return to the country, and it was successful. And then what was achieved between 1979 and 1983 again is a great example of the power potential of our people. What can be done? The mobilization of ordinary people, the transformation that was made in the society. People mobilized to transform the economy, to make the economy more diverse, to make the raw materials of Grenada work for the development of the Grenada's economy to serve the interests of the people. Unemployment increased, food security increased in Grenada. The work that was done with respect to women, making women, valuing women in the economy, valuing women in the workplace, granting women maternity leave, and other things, and also the community councils that they used to have, where members of parliament used to come meet with the people, and other officials would meet with the people on the local level, and the people could discuss with them their concerns, the improvements and transformations that they want to see. And this thing called participatory democracy, if you will, this participatory politics that was implemented in the country, that mobilized ordinary people. There were youth programs as well to get the youth actively engaged and involved in building their nation. All of that were positive transformations in the nation for the better. And we saw an economy that was growing, an economy that was developing. We saw where the country increased its capacity to produce, to send potential nurses and doctors abroad to be trained, and to train those at home who could be trained, especially nurses, and to create opportunities for scholarship for young people. Whereas under the Gary government, it was just Gary's family and one or two lackeys who had that privilege. That privilege was extended to a broad section of young people who were able to go abroad and pursue a range of different disciplines of study with the aim to bring back those skills into Grenada and use the nation building skills. So all of those were very, very important development, the impact that Grenada had internationally, the links that Grenada was making international, all of that was extremely important. And I just want to emphasize as well that the reason for the implosion of the Grenada Revolution is also an extremely important aspect of the study, because it represents the kind of mistakes that we continue to make as a people. And what we are supposed to be doing is learning from the errors of our history, the mistakes that we made. So that aspect of the history is as important as any other aspect. Why and how did the implosion take place?
Tendai. Well, Robert, what I want to do now is focus a bit of a Garveyite perspective on this subject, and I'm gonna do that first by as we mentioned on Ojima Day Tuesday, that the revolutionary government made the birthday of Papa Garvey a national celebration. It was annually celebrated along with things like Africa Liberation Day in May and so on. And so I'm going to play a snippet of this speech that, if my calculations are correct, was delivered in the month of Messiah, August of 1981. And I'll explain why I've made that calculation, because it doesn't necessarily say that. It doesn't indicate that. I'll explain why I've made that calculation after I play the snippet. But it's Maurice Bishop speaking in a market in Grenada. And so let me just play this now. And listen carefully, brothers and sisters, to the words of our martyr, who we are celebrating today, Baba Maurice Bishop.
We must continue, comrades. The comrades before, I pointed out that one of the reasons for tonight's rally, certainly the original reason for the rally, had to do with the fact that we are commemorating Marcus Garvey Day in our country. The comrades have pointed out that Marcus Garvey, when he led that struggle from Jamaica 40 years ago, he was leading at the time an anti-colonial struggle, an anti-imperialist struggle, a struggle that was aimed at bringing benefits to the poor of Jamaica and the region, a struggle that was aimed at bringing justice to the common man. For his efforts, this Caribbean son, this Caribbean hero was persecuted, was harassed, was prosecuted by the United States government. He was imprisoned not just for his beliefs, but for his great organizational ability. Today in our country, we can draw a parallel from the experience of the Marcus Garvey movement with our own movement in Grenada. We can see here too the persecution of our people, the harassment of our people, the slandering and defaming of our people, the attempt to try to demoralize and confuse our people, as we too are engaged now in another historic task of struggling against imperialism, of struggling for justice and for a new day, not just for our own people, but for the people of the Caribbean. Today, comrades, as we celebrate this Marcus Garvey Day, it is certainly one of the best possible occasions for us to speak about this great danger, this great threat which our country, our people, and our revolution are facing. There is absolutely no doubt about it at all that revolution today is in danger. There is absolutely no doubt that very careful rehearsals have taken place in the past week by the United States Armed Forces, rehearsals which undoubtedly represent a trial run for an invasion of our beloved homeland.
Tenamwari. So first and foremost, the reason why I've made the calculation of Mosiah 1981 is because of what Baba Maurice Bishop just mentioned in terms of the planned rehearsals for a planned invasion of Grenada by the American military. And that took place in 1981, months after Ronald Reagan came to power. Yes, they initiated a thing called Amber and the Amberines, yeah, which was a rehearsal off the coast of Puerto Rico to basically rehearse, yeah, a maneuver for invading Grenada by land and by sea and by air, yeah. And so, but we saw that the backdrop to Baba Bishop's remarks was an honoring of Marcus Mosiah Garvey and his impact on the region in terms of challenging Western imperialism and colonialism. Yeah. Are you able to speak to, first and foremost, the influence of the Garvey movement on Grenada and the revolution in particular?
Yeah, Tendaimwari. Well, I mean, the Garvey movement had a tremendous impact across the Caribbean. If we think about in terms of the uprisings that took place, the workers' uprisings that took place in a number of countries in the Caribbean in the 1930s, that was fed by the energies that emanated from the Garvey movement in Jamaica, when Papa Garvey was in Jamaica, and Papa Garvey had established the People's Political Party, the first political party in Jamaica, and was mobilizing the ordinary African masses around the issue of fighting against colonialism, overthrowing the colonial system, but also transforming the economy of the country so that we have an economy that is responsive to the needs and the well-being of the masses of the people, which means that the Garvey movement had a tremendous appeal, to the workers. Indeed, Papa Garvey was organizing on the union front as well, which was directly impacting on workers. So we know that the Garvey movement had mushroomed, the energies of the Garvey movement, the revolutionary energies of the Garvey movement have mushroomed throughout the Caribbean. And then there was a key activist in Grenada by the name of T.A. Marishaw. T.A. Marishaw was, amongst other things, a journalist, and an activist who was also inspired by the Garvey movement. In fact, he was born the same year as Papa Garvey, and so he had a lot to do with the impact of the Garvey movement in Grenada as well, because he himself, being inspired by Marcus Garvey, also played his part in raising up the name of Marcus Garvey in Grenada. And if we know anything about Maurice Bishop, and also his father, Maurice Bishop's father, Rupert Bishop, we will know that they were also inspired a great deal by T.A. Marshall. And so, as I said, the Caribbean islands were saturated with the spirit and the energy of Marcus Messiah Garvey and the Garvey movement. That was just, it was just unavoidable. Really, it was such a powerful movement. It was unavoidable. So it impacted from a very early, but certainly in the 1930s. That is when it really mushroomed, and you had all these workers protests and demonstrations, and even uprisings. You have the Clement Payne uprising in Barbados, the famous Clement Payne, late 1930s. So most of these happened within the mid to the late 1930s, and which had its resonance throughout the succeeding decades. The energies of those uprisings and those movements never actually died. There were still, residues of it throughout the 40s, the 50s, coming into the revolutionary 60s. So it was there. It was there as a source that fed even the revolutionary 60s in the Caribbean. 10-9.
Brothers and sisters, we're here for Voice of a Revolution. Maurice Bishop speaks. We are going to be dedicating the majority of our show today to a speech by Baba Maurice Bishop, who was sadly assassinated on this day in the year 1983. And so, as Brother Leader has said, it is definitely important that we delve into the circumstances of that particular event. But it is also extremely important that we take some time to just celebrate the man and the revolution and the revolutionaries, brothers and sisters. So we're going to be doing that today. Brother Leader, we are Garveyites, and there are many brothers and sisters who have studied, the history somewhat, that would know that there has tended to be some debate around Garveyites and brothers and sisters of the Pan-African movement who adhere to a more socialist ideology, so to speak, And so there may be ones wondering, well, all the Garveyite them love Grenada Revolution so much, when the advocates and the leaders of the Grenada Revolution were open advocates, and adherents to a socialist ideology, and ones may wonder the same thing when it comes to people like Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Touré, and Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, and so on, apparently, Brother Leader, there is supposed to be nothing but war and discord, argument, fight, and beef between the Garveyite element of the Black Power, Black Nationalist, Pan-Africanist movement and the socialist wing. Why is it that Garveyites took to, especially in the UK? Because remember, I mean, you spoke to it already, that over here, the Black Nationalist wing of the Pan-African movement was very, very involved and inspired by the Grenada Revolution. So what's that about, Brother Leader?
Well, what it is about is a common denominator, that these are African people fighting for liberation, fighting for freedom from European oppression, exploitation, and degradation. Fundamentally, that is what inspires all of us across the board. And then we may have different ideas of how to achieve that. We may have different ideas of what might be the most effective methodology for bringing about our liberation, but fundamentally we are fighting for liberation. So these are all African freedom fighters. These are all nationalists, Pan-Africanists at heart, certainly Pan-Africanists. And then you have the Pan-Africanists who because of their intellectual exposure, many of them, in fact, the Marxist movement was promoted primarily through the higher realms of academia. Many of them went to colleges of further or higher education, or went to university, where they came across left-wing intellectuals and were impacted, or were inspired by left-wing intellectuals. Of course, there was the Russian Revolution and how that impacted our people. There was the Cuban Revolution. All of that, attracted our people's interest, and not least also because Russia had this Communist International, where they had an international movement that was specifically designed and resourced to go out through the world and capture the minds and revolutionize the minds of young political thinkers, in alignment with Russian ideology. So our people got caught up in the vortex of that revolutionary movement. Unfortunately, I think it served over the decades, as the decades came and went, and as we move further and further away from the UNIA, Marcus Papa Garvey's movement at its peak, it tended to push the Garvey movement and the knowledge of Marcus Garvey in the background, and brought Marxism to the foreground. I think that was an unfortunate mistake on our part, but it's one that I think we are now recovering from, because even I find that many of these traditional socialists are now waking up, or have woken up now, to the fundamental value of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and realizing that Papa Garvey gave us the blackprint, the template for our liberation. I think more and more traditional African socialists are waking up to that reality and are studying Marcus Garvey, and giving more credence to the legacy of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. It's bringing those two factions, the nationalist Pan-Africanists and the socialist Pan-Africanists, closer and closer together, which I think is for the better.
Brother leader. Give thanks for that explanation. And so we wouldn't promote the idea then, for example, that the goals of the UNIA ACL, Garveyism, and the goals of the People's Revolutionary Government of Grenada were diametrically opposed to each other.
Not at all. As I said, there may be some departures in terms of methodology, but in terms of principle, in terms of the overarching vision, there are no differences. And indeed, as you have informed or reminded the viewers, the Grenada Revolution highlighted the legacy, the name and the legacy of Papa Garvey, and had an annual national observance of Papa Garvey's philosophy and his legacy. So that goes to show that they, even though they were inspired by socialism, or influenced by socialism, they did not see the Garvey movement as a contradiction to to the method that they were using in regards to the new dual movement.
Give thanks for that, brother leader. Obviously there's more to be said on that, but we'll leave that there for today. But we want to thank you for coming through and sharing this brief word on the importance of Maurice Bishop and the Grenada Revolution. I'm going to ask you one more question. Today is the first time what is being referred to as Heroes and Martyrs Day is being celebrated and honored in Grenada on a national level. And I know that there are some brothers and sisters who come from the revolutionary spirit who have been campaigning for this in Grenada for a number of years. Yeah. Now I've heard some reports from Grenada itself that there's an extent to which this is not being promoted particularly well or particularly widely, yeah, by the government. But it is something that has been taken on by the government. Do you think this is an important step for Grenada? And if so, why? And in that context, how would you like to see such an observance develop?
Well, Tendai Mwari, I certainly do see it as a very positive development. How could it not be when the name of Maurice Bishop and the other revolutionaries of the 1970s are being brought back to the fore, being brought back to the national consciousness in a commemorative and celebratory manner. That cannot be a negative factor.
Yeah.
It has to be a positive development, and it has come as a result of campaigns over decades of Grenadans at home and abroad to bring this to the fore, of the national consciousness. So that's a victory, emphatically a victory. What we want to ensure is that it's not suspended into the realm of symbolism and maintain in that realm, that it is implemented in substance, and that in time we will see the manifestation of that substance. And the manifestation of that substance must be that the elements of what the New Jewel movement represented, the revolutionary principles upon which it was based, we will see the elements of that coming into play in Grenadian politics. That the neo-colonial political system that give rise to neo-colonial governments that essentially serves the interest of the imperialist, the global imperialist forces, that we see a groundswell of critical mass of consciousness growing in the people of Grenada that pushes the political system and the political structure in Grenada towards that revolutionary status that we saw under Maurice Bishop and the rest of the New Jewel movement. That's what we want to see. That is what is essential to the empowerment and the liberation of African people. And we hope and trust that the people of Grenada, who campaigned hard for this day, that they will understand, they will realize that the price of victory is eternal vigilance, and that they will not rest on their laurels. They will push for symbolism to be transformed into substance. Can I just say very quickly that when we talk about the Grenada Revolution, it must also be seen, and if that point isn't clear in our discussion yet, within the context of what was taking place in the Caribbean as a whole and within the Pan-African world community. We must remember, for example, the Rodney riots in Jamaica in 1968. That had a big impact on Grenada. In fact, there were uprisings in Trinidad. There were skirmishes in Grenada and other parts of the Caribbean during that time as well. We also had in 1970 we had the Black Power Revolution in Trinidad. We had in 1972 we had the PNP government coming into power, but not led by Michael Manley, but the real substance behind that 1972 victory and that 1972 PNP government were the leftist element within the party, as well as the Black Power element within the party, as well as the resurgence of Rastafari and Black Power in Jamaica as a whole, which we saw was reinvigorated by the Rodney riot which was a result of Walter Rodney being dismissed from Jamaica, not allowed to come back into the country. Then we had in Guyana.
Sorry, just to be clear, we're not putting forward Manly as a revolutionary force,
No,
or the PFP for that matter. Just making that very clear.
Yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make. That there were elements were revolutionary elements, Black Power elements in the party itself that pushed the party in that direction. So Michael Manley had to countenance that spirit. Otherwise, the party would not have had any credibility amongst the masses of the Jamaican people. And then, in Guyana, you had the Walter Rodney, let's call it the Rodney movement in Guyana, which we know resulted in the assassination of Walter Rodney in 1980. But I just wanted to paint that picture. We also had an interesting character by the name of Errol Barrow, who was the first prime minister of Barbados, and whose father was actually a Garveyite. His father was Reginald Barrow, who was who had become a what do you call it, chaplain general of the African
Orthodox Church.
The African Orthodox Church in the African Orthodox Church. So there was that mushrooming of Black Power consciousness, Black Power uprisings, and that Black Power spirit throughout the Caribbean. And it is on the wave of that the New Jewel movement got its inspiration and its direction.
Tenamwa, brother leader, give thanks. I'm going to ask you this one more question on the subject of healing. I think it's important to address healing on a day such as this. And obviously throughout our discussions this summer and last summer, this week and last week, it's obvious that there is a lot of unanswered questions about exactly what happened on this day. Who did what and who said what. A lot of confusion was then exacerbated by the American invasion 6 days later. I want to ask you the extent to which the recognition of this day, in what way can it lead to a healing of trauma that not just the people? Yes.
Sorry, you're cutting in and out, Brother Shakara.
Oh, am I? I apologize. Am I back?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, just as I'm asking, what kind of day such as this and the recognition of a day such as this provide in terms of healing from the trauma of what happened on this day 40 years ago, and how can we use that healing process towards greater organizing and a renewal of the spirit of the Grenada Revolution?
Well, Tendai Mari, certainly we do need healing. Grenada represents a wound in the African world community that is very, very deep, and the effects of which are long-lasting. The post-traumatic effects of this tremendous laceration is still with us today. And healing can only come when Ma'at is restored. And Ma'at is fundamentally truth. From truth, we go to justice. So we establish truth, and then we ensure that justice is done. Then we restore, on the foundation of truth and justice, we restore right conduct. And when we restore right conduct, then, only then can harmony, balance, reciprocity, and ultimately order prevail. And so the truth is extremely important. There are still a lot of questions unanswered, and the extent to which those questions remain unanswered is the extent to which the trauma, the pain is perpetuated. So a process needs to be undertaken whereby we really explore and interrogate the facts, the truth about what happened, and establish the truth, and whereby justice is done. And I'm talking about African justice. I'm not talking about, you know, what went on, you know, what the Americans imposed on Grenada. No, that's not what we're talking about. But we're talking about a process that we will manage ourselves as African people. But the truth has to be known. I want to know, you know, who gave the order.
Yeah, it's a serious
for the trigger to be pulled. I want to know how on earth could any Grenadian at that time, how could any Grenadian at that time bring themselves to point a gun at a Maurice Bishop or even a Bernard Cord for that matter, or any of the leaders of the New Jewel movement and pull that trigger? I want to know how you could line up a pregnant woman, as in Jacqueline Creft. How you could line up a pregnant woman. The whole nation knew that Jacqueline Creft was carrying a baby for Maurice Bishop. How could you line up a pregnant woman and pull a trigger? You know, something went radically wrong. And the curse of that is still with us today. And only by knowing the truth about how that could ever have occurred, and by implementing a just response and restoring right conduct, so that cannot be repeated, that kind of behavior cannot be repeated among our people. Can we really have the harmony, balance, reciprocity, and ultimately order that we desperately need in our lives as a people?
Well, as we prepare to allow you to depart, Reverend Leader, I'm going to call the names of those who were shot via firing squad on that day, and after I've done so, if you could just conclude with a word of power, for said ancestors, please. Tenamwari. So we honor the names, Mojuba. We pay homage to the names of Fitzroy Bain, Norris Bain, Cecil Evelyn Maitland, Unison Whiteman, Evelyn Bullen Keith Hayling, Jacquline Creft, Maurice Bishop. And over to you, Brother Leader. Tenamwari.
We evoke the Ashe, the life force of the sons and daughters of Africa who were just named as the revolutionary leaders and organizers for the New Jewel movement, who, notwithstanding their imperfections, made serious commitment and devotion to the empowerment, the upliftment, and the liberation of African people in Grenada, and inspired the entire African world. We seek to appease their spirits at this time. What was done should not have been done. We call upon them as we call upon our great ancestors, all of our great ancestors, all of our worthy ancestors, to forgive us our foolish ways, the foolishness, the backwardness that caused us to commit such a dastardly deed against ourselves. What we did to them, we did to ourselves. What we did to them, we did to the revolution. And we are suffering today. Grenada is suffering today because of it. The African world is suffering today because of it. But we know that those spirits assume a greater power in the universe today.
Sure.
So as we ask for forgiveness, we ask you to remain with us and empower us in mind, body, and spirit. Continue to guide us as you guided us in the earthly dispensation of your existence. Continue to guide us.
Sure.
As you demonstrated courage and bravery in the earthly dimension of your existence, imbibe us with that spirit of courage, with that spirit of bravery. As you exercised wisdom and understanding in your earthly dimension of existence, transfer that wisdom to our minds so we can think freely, so we can intellect on the plane of African redemption, African revolution, Pan-Africanism. We honor you. We hail you. In spirit, you will never die. Africa, to the God of Africa be the glory. May they continue to rise like Ra on the wings of Ma'at after a favorable judgment in the council of Asar. Ashe, 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 oh, Amen Ra.
Amen Ra.
It is done. Tendai Mwari.
Tendai Mwari. Tendai Mwari. Give thanks, brother leader, for that, brother leader. Much appreciated. But these things are very necessary, you know. So yeah, we give thanks and do full joy the rest of your day, brother leader, as we honor Maurice Bishop and the martyrs of the Grenada Revolution.
Tendai Mwari, and you have a great day, brother Shakara, and keep up the tremendous work that you're doing for our people.
Tatenda, give thanks.
You are helping our people tremendously.
Give thanks, give thanks.
And we are proud of you.
Love, Tendai Mwari, give thanks. I'm humble. Tendai Mwari. All right, kings and queens, that was brother leader Bandaka of the Kebla Revivalist movement, also of the UNIA ACL RC 2020. As said, we're going to spend the majority of our time today hearing the voice of our martyr, our leader, Baba Maurice Bishop. And this is one of his most famous, if not his most famous speech, delivered, yes, in June of 1983, just months before he was to depart our earthly company, so to speak. And just to provide some backdrop for what is taking place here, as you heard in the previous clip that we played from Baba Maurice Bishop speaking in honor of Papa Marcus Messiah Garvey, the American invasion, yes, was a hot topic on the minds and the mouths of the people of Grenada and the leadership of Grenada. Also taking into consideration that the previous year, a CIA plot resulted in an assassination attempt of the entire leadership of the Grenada Revolution, okay? And so the revolutionaries and the people were very, very aware of the fact that America wanted to invade, and America was making that increasingly clear. And so, to cut a long story short, leading up to this particular speech, one of the things that began to take place is that Ronald Reagan and other officials of the American government during this time began to ramp up the propaganda against Maurice Bishop himself and the Grenada Revolution in general. And the ramping up of this propaganda centered around the building of the international airport that the revolutionary government was in the process of completing during 1983. And this airport was a significant development within the government and for the people of Grenada for travel purposes as well as economic purposes. Yeah, this airport was significant in terms of the plans that the revolutionary government had for its agricultural industries, as well as its tourism industry, and many other factors, kings and queens, okay, regarding import and export and so on and so forth. But the Ronald Reagan government, the American government, began to push the propaganda that the airport was in fact designed to facilitate the Soviet Russia invasion of the United States of America. That it was designed as a conspiracy between Russia, Cuba, and Grenada in order to facilitate an invasion by air and possibly sea from Grenada. That's why Reagan said that the airport was being built. The international airport was being built. There was no evidence for this, and the CIA's own documentation and reports of the time substantiate the fact that this was a lie, and they knew it was a lie. Yes, but Reagan was looking for an excuse to facilitate regime change in the nation. And so what happened is the leadership of Grenada, in particular Maurice Bishop, was invited by an organization in America called Trans-Africa, which is a grassroots organization. And part of that visit was also sponsored by the Congressional Black Caucus, yes, politicians of African heritage in America. And so the Grenada, the People's Revolutionary Government, decided to use that visit, yeah, in order to engage in diplomacy with the American government. They were pushing for a meeting with Ronald Reagan to resolve, yes, whatever differences existed and engage in a diplomatic process, because they had no intention of engaging militarily with the United States of America. Ronald Reagan refused to meet with Maurice Bishop, Prime Minister of a nation visits your country, and you, as the President of America, refuse, yes, to meet with the Prime Minister of Grenada. And but it began to, you know, become a bit of a public relations nightmare for Reagan, because questions began to be asked as to why, if the government of Grenada was prepared to engage in diplomatic talks, why was Reagan refusing the talks? And so in order to save face a bit, Reagan sent one of his foreign secretary advisors or something like that to meet, and I forget the guy's name, but to meet with Maurice Bishop instead of Reagan himself. Yeah. And so after meetings with American officials and meetings at the grassroots level with activists on the ground, there's a mass meeting held at Hunter College in New York, yeah, where a few thousand Africans, yes, and others, yeah, come out to hear the Prime Minister of the People's Revolutionary Government of Grenada speak. This is a bit of an abridged version of the speech, yeah, but it is also the best quality as far as video and sound version of the speech. Another day, we'll go into the longer version of the speech, because it's entirely important to get the full context of the speech, yeah? And maybe what we'll do is we'll play and then read what has been edited from, and probably engage in some analysis. But that's another thing for another day. Maurice Bishop engages in an exploration of the revolutionary processes that are currently in train at this point in the history. He speaks on the plans of the government, the successes of the government, the challenges of the government in terms of forwarding those plans and working with the people in implementing, yes, the institutions and the programs that are being implemented at this particular moment in time. And so he goes into an in-depth breakdown of the successes and the challenges of the revolution. He also goes into an in-depth breakdown of Grenada's relationship with America and the American government in particular, and what that meant in terms of global geopolitics. There are a number of noted activists from various different organizations in the African and movements of other peoples in the global community, so to speak. And so please take note of that. And with that, brothers and sisters, I give the word and the floor to our great ancestor, martyr, Prime Minister of the People's revolutionary government of Grenada, a voice of a revolution, the one and only Baba Maurice Bishop. Tendamwari.
Welcome to Caribbean Insight TV, the home of our West Indian culture and history. I'm your host, Lady V. And on this episode, Prime Minister Maurice Bishop.
I should say, let me just honor Caribbean Insight TV. If you are not subscribed to Caribbean Insight TV, please do. They have a lot of powerful programming preserving the history, culture, and the political legacy, the true political legacy of our people in the Caribbean. Yeah, so we thank them for putting out this speech and for all the work that they do in preserving our heritage and our culture. Tendamwari.
Maurice Bishop explains what the Grenada Revolution was all about and why the U.S. government opposed it. This is Maurice Bishop's first and last speech on American soil in 1983 at Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn, New York.
Thank you very much for that very warm welcome, sisters and brothers, comrades all. May I start off, sisters and brothers, by bringing to you warm fraternal greetings from the free people of revolutionary Grenada. And may I also, right at this very beginning, say how very, very pleasant it is to be back in New York among you, to be in this great hall where there are so many hundreds of our sisters and brothers. That is going to bring a great deal of pleasure to our free people, and I will certainly report your warmth, your enthusiasm, and your revolutionary support for our process when I return. Of course, we are here among friends. But looking around, there are two people here who are right now representing their country at the United Nations, people who are involved in liberation struggles, people who are struggling for their national liberation, for justice, for freedom for their countries, freedom for their peoples. It is very important right at the beginning, sisters and brothers, that we acknowledge the presence of Dr. Terzi, the representative to the United Nations of the People's Liberation Organization, the PLO. Dr. Terzi can be assured, as always, that the people of Palestine and their sole authentic representatives, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, will always have the firm support of the fraternal people of Grenada. The South African racists who have spent so much time inventing all sorts of ingenious ways of oppressing the people of South Africa, the black majority, who have spent so much time in ensuring that those people are not able to reclaim their true patrimony. They are now discovering that in common with all of the national liberation movements around the world that are forced to move to the highest stage of the struggle, that the African National Congress is also willing to make that step. in saluting the Deputy Permanent Representative of the ANC to the United Nations, let us ask him to bring back to his people, to bring back to his organization, to bring back to Oliver Tambo, to bring back to Nelson Mandela, whose spirit is here with us. To bring back to all of his people and to his revolutionary organization the love, the respect, the concern, the admiration, and the fraternal feelings of all of us to the people of South Africa. Brother David and Gava. The last time I had the opportunity, sisters and brothers, comrades, of being in New York and addressing our Grenadian nationals, other people from the Caribbean and Latin America, and of course, the people of the United States in New York, was 4 years ago, as our ambassador to the United Nations has said. Since those 4 years have passed, a lot has happened in our country. A lot has happened in the world. And one of the reasons at this time that we have come to the United States, in fact, is to be able to share our experiences of the last 4 years with the people of the United States. We were anxious to do this because, of course, there has been a major campaign over the last several weeks and months, starting from last year, November, with some remarks by the Vice President in Miami. Continuing with more remarks from the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, the Admiral of the Fleet, and then the President himself. And in all of these remarks and allegations, different allegations were made against our country. And therefore, we were particularly happy, comrades, to have had the opportunity of an invitation from Trans-Africa, the organization based in Washington that has been doing a lot of lobbying for Africa and the Caribbean. We were invited to come to address their 6th annual dinner last night. And that was a very successful event. And we want to publicly thank Trans-Africa once again for making this visit possible. The Congressional Black Caucus, too, was involved as co-sponsors of this visit, and we also want to place our appreciation on the record. Of course, we set ourselves other objectives once the visit was definitely confirmed. And these objectives included the very important objective of trying to see what we could do to deepen and strengthen the people-to-people relations which have always existed between our two countries, Grenada and the United States. At the level of the people, there has never been any problem. At the level of the people, we have always had excellent relations with the people of the United States. In fact, as you know, in some years, more American tourists come to our country than the entire population of the country. And on top of that, there is a medical school in Grenada. And at this medical school, over 700 young Americans are earning their right to become doctors, are getting a career in free Grenada. So from our point of view, clearly bad relations do not make sense. From our point of view, the need to deepen ties The need to ensure that even more American visitors come to our country every year is a critical and burning need. And another objective was to try yet again to establish some form of official contact and official dialogue with the government of the United States. We, of course, cannot decide which government is going to be in power in the United States at any given moment in time. That is a matter for the people of the United States. And whoever happens to be in power at the particular time, we believe it is extremely important for us to maintain normal relations so that we are able to conduct proper dialogue in a civilized fashion. There is a need for some kind of mechanism to be established. And that is why we have been struggling so hard over all of these years to try to get some of the basic norms reestablished. Let us exchange ambassadors, we have said. They have rejected that. So we have no ambassador accredited to Washington because they refuse to accept the credentials of the ambassador we have suggested. When they replaced their ambassador after the electoral victory of President Reagan in 1980, and the new ambassador came out in 1981, he was not, in fact, accredited to Grenada. So we have to talk, presumably, using loudspeakers. And even when we write letters, like I did, for example, in 1981 on 2 occasions, President Reagan, in March and again in August. First letter, short letter, making the simple, obvious point. Look, you are a new president. We had hoped that as a new president, you would have taken a new look at the situation, that you would have been anxious to start off on as good relations as you can with all countries around the world. We had hoped that you, therefore, would have wanted relations normalized. And we went on in that letter to make the point that what we are saying is the true bottom line is dialogue. It is talks. Therefore, let us get these talks going. We are proposing no agenda with any preconditions. Let us look at all questions. Let us put them all on the table. Let us see what you perceive as problems. We will tell you what we perceive as problems. Let us see if in the course of those discussions we can narrow down differences, so at least the new beginning that is made will be begun on a basis of mutual understanding with less distrust and less suspicion. No reply to that letter. So the fact is, sisters and brothers, we have had this long history of trying to see in what ways relations could be normalized, of working very hard at trying to get some form of dialogue going, and we have had very little success in this regard. But I really want to say tonight that we do believe it is important for us to continue that struggle. And therefore, notwithstanding the difficulties in the way, we deem it very advisable for us to continue to press for a full normalization of relations. But of course, as we press for normalization, we are also going to continue to build our revolution. We are also going to continue to consolidate our process. In the face of all of the difficulties, in the face of all of the economic destabilization, the political, diplomatic, and military threats and pressure, we don't intend to roll over and play like an ostrich. We are going to stand on our feet and keep going forward. And as you know, sisters and brothers, in these times, it is becoming more and more difficult for developing third world countries to go forward. Because unfortunately, our economies remain by and large dependent on and tied to the capitalist world economies. And therefore, when the capitalist world goes through their cyclical crises, one after the other, it has an immediate effect on us. As we say at home, when the capitalist world catches a cold, we catch pneumonia. And the crisis in the capitalist world has been deep. In all of the developed, industrialized countries, there is greater and greater unemployment. And as this unemployment goes deeper and deeper into the society, the people who feel it the most are the poor and working people. The massive cutbacks. The massive cuts in social welfare. The cuts are not coming in the arms race. The cuts are not coming out of the arms budget. I understand the talk is to spend $3 trillion over 5 years. The mind boggles. That is the kind of money that is supposed to be consumed in arms. But while that kind of money is being consumed in arms, hospitals are closing down. Jobs are being, more and more retrenchment is taking place. Pensions are being reduced. Medicaid is being reduced. In other words, the arms is swallowing up the money. The people are not benefiting. But the effect this has had on us in turn, countries of the developing world, has been to also create a crisis in the developing world. In the developing world as a whole, it is now estimated that our debts exceed $650 billion. That is how much money we owe collectively. Just servicing of debts alone is causing massive problems for the countries of the third world. Last year, $131 billion was spent on the countries of the third world in just servicing their debt, just paying the interest, not 1 cent back on the capital. And that took $131 billion. But on top of that, we are also discovering that it is becoming more and more difficult to engage in trade with the countries of the Western industrialized world. But even as they make it more difficult for us to trade with them, the whole question of aid, which at one time used to be regarded as a kind of duty that the developed capitalist world, the developed industrialized world had, if duty it was, that duty has virtually disappeared. Because the reality is that aid has also decreased quite dramatically for third world countries. But not satisfied with all of that, what they have now done after cutting off aid, cutting off trade, cutting off investment, making it virtually impossible to get money through the international financial institutions, now they are forcing more and more third world countries to go directly to the international capital market, to the big commercial banks to get loans. But the reality is that by forcing us more and more to have to go to the international capital market, the debt trap is intensified even more. And while all of this is going on, sisters and brothers, there are so many people in the world who are unemployed, so many people in the world who are going hungry, to bed hungry every single night. So many millions in the third world who are illiterate and whose governments either do not care or feel they cannot do anything to solve that problem. Unemployment, hunger, malnutrition, disease, illiteracy. These are the crimes and the sins that are visited upon the poor developing countries of the third world, while the industrialized countries continue to exploit our resources and to keep the profits. But yet, sisters and brothers, in the face of all of that, the Grenada Revolution has nonetheless continued to go forward and to make progress. At a time when even the big, powerful, industrialized nations were growing backwards last year, we grew forward by 5.5%. The revolution in Grenada, starting from a base from Gary of 49% unemployment, coming from that base, when we did a census last year, April 1982, the unemployment rate had dropped from 49% to down to 14.2%. The last year of Gary, 1978, the capital investment program was $8 million. The first year of the revolution, that figure was more than doubled. It went to $16 million. The second year of the revolution, it was doubled again. It went to $39.9 million. And by this time, the experts were saying that is impossible. You don't have the resources, you don't have the management, you don't have enough tractors, you don't have enough trucks, you don't have enough engineers. You can't possibly do it. You all were only lucky in 1979 when you double Gary own. And you're only lucky in 1980 again when you double your own. And then when we went in 1981 and we double it again, they say, well, we don't know if it's luck, but something is wrong. You all can't do that again. And then last year in 1982, it went up to over 100 million. And then we gave them the secret. We told them that in a revolution, things operate differently in the normal situation. We have been able to make these accomplishments because in Grenada, consistent with our three pillars of the revolution, where the first pillar of the revolution is our people, who are always at the center and heart and focus of all of our activities, we are able to mobilize and organize the people to cut out waste, to cut out corruption, to stamp on inefficiency, to move to planning, to look out for production, to check on productivity, to make sure that state enterprises are not set up to be subsidized, but that state enterprises too must become viable, must make a profit, and therefore the state sector will then have the surplus to bring the benefits. We have been able to pull our people into the whole economic process. And our people have gladly been pulled into the economic process because our people see the benefits which the revolution has brought to them. They understand that when 37 cents out of every dollar is spent on health and education, that means something. In this country, the figure is probably nearer to 10 cents on every dollar. Because today in Grenada, the money that the people of Grenada used to have to spend, for example, when they went to a doctor or a dentist, that money they no longer have to spend because they now have free health care throughout the system. Our people understand the value and the benefit of free secondary education because they know now that once their children are able to pass the common entrance exam and get into secondary school, they no longer have to worry about finding those fees, which, as you know, for agricultural workers, for example, were very often impossible. But not just free secondary education, but in effect, free university education. Moving from a situation before the revolution, where in the last year of Gary, 1978, just 3 people went abroad on university scholarships. And they happened to be Gary's daughter, and one is other minister's daughter. Moving from that situation, in the first 6 months of the revolution, 109 students were able to go abroad on free university scholarships. Our people are more and more getting to understand what we mean when we say that education to us is liberation. That education is a strategic concern of this government. That is why this year, 1982, is the year we have named the year of political and academic education, because we understand the importance of bringing education to our people. Following the establishment of the Center for Popular Education program in early 1980, within 1 year of the work of the CPE program, the illiteracy figure in Grenada was reduced to 2% of the entire population. The people understand that in all areas of their basic needs, real attempts are being made to solve these problems. 2.5 million gallons more of water, pipe-borne water, are flowing into the homes of our Grenadians at this time. Before the revolution, under 30% of all homes had potable water. The people understand what it means when electrification is brought to their village. The people understand what it means when they know that by the middle of next year, we would have doubled the electricity output and capacity in our country, and therefore more people would have the possibility of electricity. Our people, therefore, sisters and brothers, have a greater and deeper understanding of what the revolution means and what it has brought to them. They certainly understand very, very clearly that when some people attack us on the ground of human rights, when some people attack us on the ground of constituting a threat to the national security of other countries, our people understand that is foolishness. They know the real reason has to do with the fact of the revolution and the benefits that the revolution are bringing to the people of our country. The real reason for all of this hostility is because some perceive that what is happening in Grenada can lead to a new socio-economic and political path of development. They give all kinds of reasons and excuses, some of them credible, some utter rubbish. There's an interesting one that we saw very recently in a secret report of the State Department. I want to tell you about that one, so you can reflect on that one. That secret report made this point, that Grenada is different to Cuba and Nicaragua, and the Grenada Revolution is in one sense even worse, I'm using their language, than the Cuban and Nicaraguan revolutions, because the people of Grenada and the leadership of Grenada speaks English and therefore can communicate directly to the people of the United States. I can see from your applause, sisters and brothers, that you agree with the report. But I want to tell you what that same report also said, and said that also made us very dangerous. And that is that the people of Grenada and the leadership of Grenada are predominantly black. They said that 95% of our population is black, and they had a correct statistic. And if we have 95% of predominantly African origin in our country, then we can have a dangerous appeal to 30 million black people in the United States. Now, that aspect of the report clearly is one of the most sensible ones. But, sisters and brothers, how do we evaluate other sides of the report? Like when they say that Grenada violates human rights. When they say to us, how come you have detainees? What about the press? What about elections? When they say to us, where are your elections? They don't turn around at the same time and say to their friends in South Africa, where are your elections? When they say to us that elections must be held, and if you don't have elections, then you can't expect support. And unless you have elections, then we can't give you the normal treatment. We say, Salvador Allende of Chile. Salvador Allende of Chile was elected in September 1970 by the people of Chile. Allende did not take power through a revolution. Allende did not form a militia. Allende did not grab any land or property. Allende had no political detainees. Allende did not crush the press. He did not close down the parliament. He did not suspend the constitution. He played by every rule they wrote, but they killed him still. These people understand very well that a revolution means a new situation. Revolution means that the abuses and excesses of the violent, reactionary, and disruptive minority has to be crushed so that the majority interest can prevail. When the Americans had their revolution in 1776, it took them 13 years to call their election. They talk about detainees, but when the American Revolution came in 1776, 600,000 people were detained in this country. 100,000 Americans in the first week of the American Revolution, 100,000 fled to Canada. Thousands were locked up without charge or trial. Hundreds were shot. And the counter-revolutionaries after the American Revolution, they had no right to vote. They had no right to teach. They had no right to preach. They had no right to a job. Their land was confiscated without payment. So when the falsifiers of history try to pretend that the American Revolution was a Boston Tea Party, was a very bloody Tea Party. That's something that very often happens in all revolutions. The spontaneous upheaval of the masses did not really happen in Grenada. A church-based organization in Washington called Epica wrote a book last year on Grenada. They called it Grenada, the Peaceful Revolution. We can understand why. So when these elements come and make these statements, we understand only too well where they are coming from. They understand that in Grenada, no one is ever interfered with for what he says. No one is ever interfered with for what he writes. In fact, today, criticism is deeper than ever in the society in a constructive way. But our people also understand that the first law of the revolution is that a revolution must survive, must consolidate, so more benefits can come to them. And because of this fact, the revolution has laid down as a law that nobody, regardless of who you are, will be allowed to be involved in any activity surrounding the overthrow of the government by the use of armed violence. And anyone who moves in that direction will be ruthlessly crushed. But we also feel, sisters and brothers, that the time has in fact come for us to make another step along the way towards institutionalizing the process that we have been building for 4 years. And that is why only yesterday in Grenada, the new chairman of the Constitutional Commission arrived in our capital city, St. George's, from Trinidad and Tobago, to announce the formation of the Constitutional Commission that has now undertaken the task of drafting a new constitution for our young revolution. This constitution is not really going to look like the one that the Queen gave us in 1974. This time round, this constitution is going to come out of the bowels of our people and out of our earth. Our people will have their inputs and will decide what they want to see go into that constitution. Our new constitution also is certainly going to institutionalize and entrench the systems of popular democracy